we are here on a shared journey at Oregon State University today is because the Mary Rivers Band of Kalapuya people were forcibly removed to what is now the Grand Ronde and Siletz reservations to make way for settlers. Many times folk do not even think of the impact of continued occupation of indigenous lands here in what we call the United States on the descendants of those who were forcibly removed. Let's just say some of us think of it often. We think of it as new buildings are erected. We think of it as forests are clear-cut. We think of it as water is contaminated. We think of it as we live alongside the existence of the settler colonial regime known as the United States. A few years ago, I was at the Longhouse here on campus, and a Palestinian man stopped in to ask about the U.S. reservation systems. I will never forget the look in his eyes when he told me he knew what it meant and knew what it felt like. He asked if I understood the connections between our homelands and what that means. I told him I did. So while I'm not an indigenous person from the Corvallis area, or even Oregon for that matter, I live with the reality of settler colonial occupation very closely. I was born in our coastal Chumash ancestral lands, in what is now called Santa Barbara, California. Because we are not federally recognized by the U.S. government, our lands were stolen through the transactional colonial controls of Spain, Mexico, and then the United States. My first home was in a canyon in what is now known as Goleta. Actually, it was Gaviota, my bad. It was a land that my father and uncles gained control of for our tribe. I have a picture of my dad holding me in a pepper tree that we used to sit in to complement the memories I have of that same tree, as well as our home and my auntie and uncle's homes. However, when I was 5 years old, that land was taken by an oil company to build a refinery. Not only did it displace us from the tiny fraction of land we had left, it destroyed a monarch butterfly nesting ground as well. The area has been referred to as Mariposa Reina, or butterfly queen. Today you will not see any butterflies or Chumash people there. Rather, you see the concrete and pipes and machinery. Now I'm even farther from my home, separated from that connection to ancestral lands. This impacts me very deeply. The effect of settler colonialism is really hard to describe. So I'm going to show you a couple of slides now. This was the last time I went down to Santa Barbara. Excuse me. There's an area that's called Painted Cave. A lot of our sites are zoned as archaeological sites and resource areas. And so it was really important to me on this last trip for some personal reasons to be able to visit the Painted Caves. And so I went up there with my brother, but you can't really go there because it's fenced off. And that's to prevent it from being vandalized, but it also creates this access barrier. And so for me it was a little bit sad, but I was glad I still got to spend some time there. And another place that was really important to go to whenever we go home is to Tuckalody Beach. And this area has a really important story to our history with our tribe, in that it's where there was a burial ground for our boat captains who were very highly regarded in our communities ancestrally until the Spanish came in, like took away our tamols, which my uncle and my uncles and my dad helped bring back. But there was a dispute to place this one, the resort right there is called the Bacara. And when they were trying to decide whether or not they could build it in that same site, there was a couple of things there. One, there was a burial ground, and two, there was another monarch nesting ground, because there's monarchs down there. And at the time, my dad worked in our cultural resources protection, and him and my uncle were on the cover of the local newspaper called The Independent, and they put a little tag on there that said like Indians and cowboys and guns on why, or something really racist like that. And this was like in the late 90s or maybe it was the late 90s when this was going on. As you can see, the Bacara one, it's a huge resort. I don't know who owns it now, but because there's a lot of stories about it. What might have happened to those burial grounds, you might ask? Well, they're underneath a tennis court now with a wire mesh between the core and the bones. And what happened to the monarch nesting ground, same thing that happened at the other one. So that connection with the land and the butterflies and some of the experiences that I've had are kind of connected in that way. Another thing that happened with that sacred beach is that you could see that no public access sign right there. Those of you who know me, you think that meant I didn't go to the beach. We went to the beach. It was really important for us to be able to pay that respect to those boat captains that are laying there. And there's some cultural signifiers like on signs along the path down to the beach. But what I didn't realize is that, well, I knew that there's oil spills a lot down there because there's refineries and oil rigs all over California. But I didn't realize there was a spill, I think the year before, and they thought they had cleaned most of it out. And there you can see, this one is the island of Moon. That's where our origin stories come from. And right in front of it is one of the oil rigs standing between us. So it's like a very visual separation from that land for us. And then on the other picture, that's my hand. And when we went down to the water, we ended up getting oil all over our feet. I didn't realize it was happening at the time, but there was oil still underneath the sand that you couldn't really see. And it took a really long time to get that stuff off. I was like, I want to be on a Dawn commercial right now. Drink the Dawn and some water, but it took us a while to get it off because there wasn't really any soap on the beach. But just the fact that to even go down there and access that space meant that our bodies were contaminated as well as that space. And so that was a huge lesson that I walked away from this past year, and that was last year during spring break, so it wasn't even that long ago. So that being said, the theft of land and resources doesn't always come without resistance. Here in the United States, we're supposed to have a constitutional right to assembly and to protest. That's always applied equally, right? Yeah, probably not. I'm going to show another video now to help illustrate the unequal treatment. Did anybody follow the Dakota Access pipeline happenings? Okay.
With the stroke of a pen, Trump's trying to undo everything we've worked so hard for. But as Indigenous people, our existence is our resistance. We protect Mother Earth and the water because it's who we are and we have no other choice. I'm facing 7 years in prison, and yet I remain dedicated to peace and prayer. Pray with us.
Will on earth. The wind comes in four corners, four directions, four colors, and death rides on four horsemen. A black snake with some black tanks. How much money do these companies need to make? They can drop their product, but they wanna save a buck. Already extracted billions, when is enough? I used to be in the oil fields, getting paid, but I quit, cause oil water I can't drink. Look down and see, come eat me, lie, die in the mud. I looked up and told myself that enough's enough. Money does not own my soul, living comfortable. It's not in my plans, my head's in the sand. Some things were worth the gold, some things they can't be sold, some things can't be replaced. She's your mother, the fresh water is her veins. What is going on? Have we all lost our minds? Every human needs clean water to survive.
We're sorry. Your call could go. Mark County Sheriff's Department.
Hi. I need to report an assault.
Okay. Where did you occur at?
Standing Rock. There are innocent, unarmed people being attacked with water in militia-style police firing at point-blank range with high-powered mace on unarmed people. Who protects the people?
Yeah, if there's police there, then it has.
The police are the ones attacking innocent unarmed people. So what do we do to stop the police literally hitting people at point-blank range in the face? People can lose eyes. People are going to get hypothermia. People could die. We have elders here. We have children here. We have all ages here. Nobody is armed except for the police. Who protects the people from the police?
Well, I guess if you want to put it up the chain of command, the next person to talk to would be the governor's office.
Love is the strongest, this path is the hardest. But if we were strong enough to do it, we wouldn't see it. Our prayers would not be needed. This movement's very needed. Indigenous wisdom unheeded and sacred things depleted. I'm Mexicano, Mala Clubda, and I'm white too. I'm mixed with everyone, so part of me's just like you. Every group of human beings shares the same stars. And if the earth is not your mother, are you from Mars? Decline since 1492, 500 years and counting. Survive in the genocide they call colonizing my turtle island. What is a fossil fuel? Continued destruction, nothing new. Living a system, taking our children, shipping the fields till nothing's true. I had that money in front of me, but I left it. Cause oil money's dirty if my mother gets disrespected. We're disconnected, these times are hectic and feeling heavy. But still we love all living beings and suffer for the many. We are peaceful people, that's why we walk with prayer. And if that wasn't true, we wouldn't be standing here. We're peaceful people, we walk with prayer. Turtle Island, have no fear. Despite what they show in the media, we're kind people, hold your ground.
Does anybody know what Prolific was charged for that he was facing 7 years? I'm curious. It was for flying a drone, for some of the drone footage. He ended up getting the charges dropped, FYI, but just the fact that that's how much he was facing for flying a drone says a lot. I have a little bit of a story about that night where they were showing that call. That 911 call was actually like 6 minutes long, the whole thing. I was watching the live stream when it was happening. We had a lot of family and really close loved ones that were over there at that moment, and it was really scary. And for me, I was like, I didn't really know what to do other than to pray, like how I've been raised and taught to do. So that's what I did. I called some other people that do ceremony, and I was like, we need to do this is what we can do where we're at. And I also had to comfort my older 2 kids because they were really worried about if their dad was there, which he was. We found out later, but I was like, I couldn't confirm that he was going to be okay because we could see what was going on during the live streams. So just those impacts on family, and that was like a year and a half ago, it wasn't that long ago, that was going on. Does anybody know what the top picture is about? The Bundys, yeah. So they took over Malheur National Wildlife Refuge, which is in eastern Oregon, here in the state of Oregon. They occupied it for some time. I can't remember exactly how long, but it was a little while. They were heavily armed. They were threatening people that they were going to kill them. They destroyed Burns Paiute archaeological sites. They destroyed some of the National Historic Office site that was there. They did all kinds of stuff. They were all acquitted. They went to court and everything, and everybody was acquitted. In the bottom picture, there was a lot that happened that we didn't talk about, but there's still several hundred people that are going to trial for Standing Rock. But even as it was going on, people were getting strip searched for misdemeanors. They were getting numbers written on their arms and thrown in pins for basically for peaceful protest is what they were doing. They were gathered on federal land, treaty land at that, and treated in those ways. And I'm bringing it up right now. It wasn't that long ago. For one, people are like, "Why do you still talk about that?" I'm like, it was like, really, it wasn't that long ago. It just happened. This is an ancient history. And also, when it was going on, I remember I was like, this is so important. Everybody should be paying attention to this. This is setting precedents for everything, like with courts and the legal system, how all those cases end up setting precedents. So, as we can see, constitutional, civil, and human rights are not applied equally in any settler state, and that includes this one. And I am going to read you a poem too. I wrote this poem when the Bundys were occupying Malheur, and I also, around that same time, we were dealing with some remains that are still here on campus, some native remains, and returning those to one of the tribes. So this one's actually called Regarding White Terrorism, so I'm going to leave that slide up while I read this. Bones rattle beneath the familiar sound of colonizing footsteps. Self-righteousness seeps into the earth, traveling through the roots and soil. The people speak, the people cry, the people are never heard. The earth is sick with disease that mutates with each remedy. Earth medicine flowing from the people's hands. We hold them out, but all the others see are bones. Bones that cannot speak, bones that can be buried, bones that are not ours anymore. The creak of boots rattle them, but no one hears, only those who know truth. We sing in lightning strikes, but they only hear the faint echo of times past. All the while our warriors watch, knowing what will happen if they mobilize again, knowing they have family, knowing what must be done, knowing that to them they are just another set of bones. Yes, the bones rattle when they need to be heard. They speak to those who listen. They tell us that this is just another phase of continued occupation, another distraction to the poisoning of life, another reminder of what we are to them, another reminder that we are more than just bones. We are part of earth, of water, of sky. We are part of the healing and the cleansing. We are still here. And so standing rock was really important. It's still important. Like I said, it set a lot of precedent. The continued cases are going to continue to set further precedents. The most recent one that I know that's going on is the one with Red Fawn, who was charged with a weapons charge that was planted. But there's other stories about Indigenous people of these lands. So in the first video, they talked about the water being poisoned. This is a picture of a map of some areas that are contaminated with from the uranium mining in the Southwest. It's mostly around the Navajo Nation and the Hopi Reservation, which is in the middle of the Navajo Nation. The picture on the right is of from the Hopi Reservation. But the water there, they don't hardly have any water as it is, and there's like tens of thousands of homes without water that go to these springs. And a lot of them are unregulated because of the high levels of uranium contamination. And so if you think about how many generations this has been going on, there's a high levels of cancer that they're facing. And when the Flint, Michigan water crisis was hitting the news, a lot of Native folk were trying to say, can we work together on providing water infrastructure, not only for Flint, but for other places. And I hear Winona LaDuke talk about that a lot, where she's like, can we stop doing infrastructure as in pipelines and create safe drinking water for people? That makes a lot more sense. And so when she said that, I was like, that is a really good redirection of energy and resources. Because I know a lot of people down there are in rough shape. And those are just a couple of examples. And so why do I bring this all up today? What does it have to do with Palestine? I take it back to that story I shared about the Palestinian elder. I think of him asking if I could see the connections. So my question for all of you today is, can you see it too? Can we see a shared struggle and find connections to work towards a shared liberation? What does decolonial justice solidarity efforts look like to you? And those are just some things to think about. And before I close and do questions, I'm going to leave you with one of my favorite quotes and with a poem. And my hope is that these words will help remind you that you're not alone in your resistance efforts and that they do matter. And so this is one of my favorite quotes by John Trudell. It says, every human being is a raindrop, and when enough of the raindrops become clear and coherent, they then become the power of the storm. And if you've heard me talk before, you might have heard me share this poem before, but it's called No Power, like with a K. Touch the earth, soft hands, soft earth, soft heartbeat. Touch the earth, no power. Hear the wind, whispering names, whispering wind, whispering stories. Hear the wind, no power. Feel the rain, healing hearts, healing rain, healing spirits. Feel the rain, no power. Hear it, heartbeat, touch it, earth beat, feel it, life beat, no power. Rhythms sung by rain, rhythms carried by wind, rhythms heart of earth, no power. Touch the earth, she is life. Feel her heartbeat, it is yours. You are earth, earth is you, no power. So if we can find a way to feel that heartbeat within each of us and feel it connected and beat together and be the power of the storm together, I think we could create a lot of change and resistance. So thank you.
Thank you for you. Actually, I have to share something. I'm Palestinian, and I'm really always shocked how I'm always touched by the indigenous rituals or language or songs. It's always like I cannot even hold my tears when I'm listening. I've been in many rituals in many places in US, and it was already so deep for me to listen to the language, to the song, to everything. So my question here, one of the resilient of Palestinian is Arabic as a language, because language is like the identity, the culture. So what is the indigenous people doing something in order to save, to keep the language? Because I feel, according to my opinion, language is everything. So if you keep the language, you can keep who you are. And always the colonizers, they tried to, and they did actually, to change the people tongue. So what are you doing for that?
Okay, yeah, that's a long discussion. I'll try to do a short version. Basically, the boarding school era of the late 1800s to early 1900s was devastating for native languages. The whole motto behind boarding schools was to kill the Indian and save the man. And so just thinking of that as a school motto and taking kids away from their families, like literally ripping them away from families, cutting their hair off, all that stuff, and not letting them speak their languages meant that it started getting lost. And there's a lot of languages that it's really hard to recover other than through anthropological records and ethnographies. And so working with linguists, I know, has been helpful for tribes. My tribe in California is starting to try to revitalize our language as well. That's happening in a lot of places. I think that looking at the way that the Native Hawaiian people did their immersion programs has been a model that's been incorporated in some schools here in the United States as well. So I agree language is super important, and thinking about how settler colonialism, that's really destroyed a big part of our identities, and even finding words to describe ourselves or know what our ancestral terms for ourselves are can be hard sometimes to separate from those labels that were put on us too. because some of the tribes' names aren't even what they called themselves before. So just thinking about that. But I know there are a lot of language revitalization efforts, and yeah, I agree, it's super important. So learning those ceremonies and songs and stuff. And the other part too is like Native people weren't citizens and weren't, well, that's another complicated thing because still weren't full citizens, right, until 1924. And so there's that, and also that our ceremonies were written as illegal until 1978. And so that wasn't that long ago. So we literally could not do our ceremonies, or well, people did, but that's part of resistance, is to keep it going along. And so there's a lot of federal laws and policies that were put in place that made it really difficult, but I think a lot of folk are doing what we can to try to bring all that back and maintain it. That was carried on. Yeah, so thank you.